January 13th of 1903 was when the first 102 Koreans landed in Hawaii. At that time it was a U.S. territory, so we commemorate that as the first arrival of Korean immigrants. There were Koreans that were in the United States before that, starting as early as 1882 when diplomatic ties were created between U.S. and the Kingdom of Korea. But for immigration purposes, we like to think of January of 1903 as the origin. So when we were approaching the 100th anniversary of that day, around the year 2000, 2001, some of us, including the Korean American Coalition and others that were involved in the academic and the historical side of things, said, you know, we should do something to really commemorate the 100th anniversary, because frankly, not that many people know that story. Not even Korean Americans know the story about our own origins. And so in Hawaii, there was already an effort to do a conversation, some kind of a big event to commemorate the 100th anniversary. So they call themselves the Centennial Committee on the Korean Immigration. So Hawaii's government sanctioned this organization to say, do something to commemorate the 100th anniversary. And so the concept came along, we said, why don't we take the Centennial Committee of the Korean Immigration in Hawaii and make that a national organization so that all these things can happen together. So I was asked to organize the Virginia, Maryland, DC area, which is where I was living at the time. And so I got some Korean American first generation leaders of a community, including Mr. Kwan, Chung and others who were involved in some of the other Korean organizations. And they said, yeah, let's work together. So the first generation in the Virginia area created an organization called CCKIDC, a Centennial of Korean Immigration Committee in Washington, D.C. And I wrote the bylaws, so we got that up and running, and then we started organizing things that we could do in the D.C. area. So from 2001 till about 2003-ish or so, we did all that, and it was great. Lots of events. There was a documentary that was made. We raised some money to have all these traveling exhibits. All that was done. So come 2004, we're like, we're done. 100th anniversary, that was great. It was wonderful that we celebrated. So many people know about this. And then some states said, well, we did this governor's proclamation. That was nice to have the government officially recognize it. But I wonder if we should do something even more than that. Maybe have the national government recognize this. And so I was working on Capitol Hill at the time for a senator from Illinois named Dick Durbin. And I had a good friend who was Sean Woo, who was a Korean American staffer. He worked for a Republican senator named George Allen from Virginia. And so my boss and George Allen knew each other. They didn't work together very closely, but they knew each other well enough. And so the idea was, why don't we do a bipartisan resolution that declares January 13th of every year as Korean American Day, nationally. So if the national government recognizes it, then wouldn't that be great? Every year, instead of having to go back and ask a governor to do a proclamation every year, it just becomes a standalone thing. So we thought, yeah, let's try that. So Sean and I started writing this resolution. I mean, literally just typed it up, and then we got some advisors, some historians, some academics, really smart people to look at it, give us some input, edit the lines here and there, make sure all the numbers are accurate. And then we drafted the resolution, and then we drafted the floor statement so that the senators can actually introduce it on the floor. And I wrote that as well. And then, I can't remember exactly when it was, but I believe it was sometime in 2004. We introduced that, Senate passed it, in the House, the House of Representatives, Congressman Tom Davis and Bobby Scott and Jim Moran and a few others, Danny Davidson, they took that version of our language, introduced it in the House. Mike Hondo was part of that process, and they passed it as well. So Congress, Senate, and House combined passed the same resolution declaring that January 13th of every year will be Korean American Day. Now, we celebrate that. We're very happy about that. What I didn't realize at that time was that we made history in the United States Congress, because that was the first time in the history of America where Congress officially designated a day out of 365 days, designated specifically one ethnic community. That's never been done before. There are a couple of ways that the resolution that passed in Congress has had lots and lots of reactions in all positive ways. First, other states, including Virginia, passed its own version saying, hey, nationally we recognize it, we also want to recognize it in our state. So in Virginia in 2007, we passed a resolution that does that in Virginia, and I believe at least a dozen other states have done that as well. But what that did was it gave comfort to legislators in all these states who may not be Korean. In fact, we don't have that many Korean American state legislators. In the whole country, we only have 14 right now serving. and most of them are in a few states. It's not like we have 14 states that have Korean American state legislators. We have 14 total. Some of them are in California, some of them in Hawaii, some of them in Maryland. And so we don't have that many of us representing. And in Congress, there are only 3 states that are represented in Congress by Korean Americans right now in 2022. And so what the passage of the Korean American Day has done is allowed all these states across the country to say, you know what, we already recognize Korean Americans at the national level. We should do something for them here as well. And so, for example, we most recently passed Kimchi Day resolution, commemorating November 22nd of each year as the day that we celebrate kimchi, which is obviously the most famous food that Koreans like to eat, and all the health benefits and all that stuff, and the cultural aspect of that. That was done. October 21 is Hanbok Day, which is something that Koreans celebrate. Hanbok. We haven't done it in Virginia, but I know some states are looking at that. We also have October 9th as Hangul Day, Hangul the language, because it's such a scientific and such an amazing form of communication. So that was the resolution was done. We've had a Taekwondo Day. I believe it's September 6th of every year is Taekwondo Day. We've also had a number of other days, including days that are darker in the history of Korea in terms of March 1st Independence Movement Day and August 15th, the real official Independence Day of Korea. So these days that have meaning for Koreans, we now have a lot of states and cities and counties that pass resolutions recognizing it, making it a special day, and making the Korean Americans that live in that community feel welcome. Say, hey, we recognize you, we see you, we want to participate with you, we want to celebrate your history and your culture, we accept you. That all happened as a result of the national government saying, let's declare Korean Americans as a special group of people. So I think that has a tremendous impact on how we, all of us, anywhere in the country, can feel that we have a seat at the table, and that the governments at whatever level, that they speak to us and then they see us as well. So I think that's a good thing.